a good introduction of the topic. So here first thing we are going to talk about the topic of economic geography. Now as a student within human geography, this is one of the topic which was a headache to me, always a headache to me. And why? Because I really felt, in fact, within human geography, two topics which always troubled me. One was economic geography and the second one was demography. And reasons are very similar in both of the cases, because I always felt that they are too much informative. They are very much informative. They contain so much of information that we have to learn in them. And mugging up was never my strength. So basically I relied on more conceptual understanding of the topics. So that is why I always faced lots of underconfidence in this topic. But when I actually went into the first means I wrote, I was like stuck, and was first or second, I don't remember, but I was like stuck in the paper. And one of the topics which I attempted in paper 2 particularly came from economic geography. And if you talk about that question, I still remember the question was role of raw material in distribution of iron and steel industries in India. And I didn't know much what to write about, except the fact that where major iron and steel industries are located and which were the source areas of coal and iron ore. And just on the basis of that, we'll learn here Weber's theory of industrial location. So just using the Weber's theory of industrial location, I wrote an answer, and here in that paper I got 175 marks. It was a 60 marker question, so definitely I would have got very good marks in that question, I expect, because we never know what is the breakup of the marks. But I couldn't have got 175 marks if I would have got less marks in that 60 marker question. Okay. So there one thing I learnt, and that was that information has a limited role in giving you marks in geography. And if we have already seen this, that geography from earlier times wanted to be more analytical subject. It wanted to become a science, more explanatory. And that is where if you talk about the role comes in. And when we are talking about Indian geography, I have told you before also, much of it is just chorography. If we can make it more chorological in our writing, we will get very good marks. Okay, so that is the crux of economic geography which I am talking about. If I just think about economic geography, there is no limit to what I can study in economic geography. Because if I just take some of the topics, like one of the topics we'll see world resources. And when we are talking about resource as a concept, very famous economic geographer Zimmerman, he says that resources are mind dependent. So resources are mind dependent. That means if I can visualize something as a resource, and I can develop the technology to move beyond the resistance offered by the resource. Resources always offer an initial resistance, which we overcome by developing the technology to use it. Very clearly, that thing would ultimately become a resource. Okay. So we'll later talk about that. So if this is the case, can you understand that resources can include so many things? Yes or no? In fact, one of the biggest resources is human resource, because it is human mind which thinks. And it is really paradoxical in this sense when we say that India has scarcity of resources. The statement is true. Why? Because we haven't been able to convert our population into a human resource. We haven't been able to develop that or go beyond that resistance which is offered by the resources before they become resources. Okay? So we will talk about all these things in the resource topic, but this is basically what is the case of economic geography. So here again I would suggest that economic geography we will focus. Will be giving you some material here, and I think this material has already been given to you. So some of the broad outlooks have been given. Some informative aspect of every topic has been provided to you. But as I said before, also that in this topic I will be updating on what we have done in the past batches. So many things what we will be doing, we will be writing it in the class itself. So many of the informative, whatever information level you need, we have tried to give you that information in these booklets which are given. Okay, like for example, global freshwater resource. So whatever, how much I need to talk about that, it is given there. इससे ज़्यादा information fetch करना, I don't think it will give me the desired output. This much information which is given, it is enough. Okay, what I just want, I want some facts and figures essentially to supplement the conceptual ideas that I will be discussing. Okay. So these are quite elaborative. ठीक है, so these are quite elaborative and they will be sufficient to supplement to what we will be doing in the classes. Can you also share the PDFs as well? No. Whatever I will be doing in the class with the PDFs. ठीक है, and just basically you look from the class what has been discussed and you just copy it from there. Don't ask me to upload all the PDFs. All my hard work, you just want to go to the internet, and internet is a place where you know what happens. Okay. So let us little bit talk about economic geography, and then what we will do, we will discuss the syllabus. Yes, I know there is no malintention, but I cannot do that. Okay. So I'll give you one question and you think about this question. Describe the evolution of economic geography. Yes, there are groups sharing lectures and materials, and I will look into that. What I can do, many things I cannot control. People should be considerate and they should not be doing that. Because it is not your intellectual material which you are sharing so much freely. If it is like this, then what will happen? People will stop innovating. Okay, leave it. You try this question, describe the evolution of economic geography. Okay. So, if you talk about economic geography very clearly we know that it is a sub-discipline within geography. Sub-discipline within human geography which does not have very long history. Which doesn't have very long history. In fact, we can say that the beginning of economic geography can be seen in the late 19th century. late 19th century, and in the late 19th century it was its rise, we can say, was connected with the belief by various European governments that the knowledge of economic geography both helped to strengthen their colonial projects and also provided their domestic business class with a potential competitive advantage. Over their rivals. Okay. So the beginning of the study of economic geography, we can say that it is a phenomena which started in the late 19th century, but very clearly the real growth of the study of economic geography occurred in the post-World War period. Post-World War period. Okay, and we'll see how it has occurred in the post-World War period. But this is basically what is how the growth of the economic geography has taken place. In general, we can say that economic geography has passed through at least 4 stages of development. At least 4 stages of development. And if I talk about the environmental, determinism फेज, तो मैंने फिर से स्टेज लिख दिया, उसको फेज कर लो. environmental determinism phase, Second, if you talk about is the quantitative phase. Third, if you talk about essentially was the political economy phase. And the fourth one is which is the most recent one, is the cultural turn phase. ठीक है. So there are 4 phases we can identify in the growth of economic geography. So initially it was environmental determinism phase, which passed on to the quantitative phase, and ultimately it was political economy phase, and then there was cultural turn phase. ठीक है. So can you see what I have done here? What essentially I have done here? Did I just utilized what we have learned in the perspectives in human geography? Yes or no? Tell me. Haven't we just utilized what we have learned in the perspective in human geography? Okay. So if you talk about the first phase, that is the environmental determinism phase. During this phase, it was essentially what? It was essentially descriptive in nature. Descriptive in nature, where the primary occupation or the primary focus was in identifying and describing the spatial division of labor found across the world. And if we talk about like for example, there could be various type of spatial division of labor found across the world. For example, there was presence of subsistence economies. There were others also, like for example, there was slavery economies, there was feudalistic economies, and there was capitalist, mainly the capitalistic economies. So broadly what we can divide it into this phase. Mostly during this period, what we find that capitalism, particularly if you talk about, was in its first initial phase of development. And if you talk about, it was basically what we call it as the merchant capitalism phase. What we essentially call it as, also call it as mercantilism. I'll explain all these things later on. Mercantilism. So mercantilism was essentially based upon what? It was simply based upon the idea of purchasing natural resources cheaply, and which was, product of from colonies. So it was essentially based upon the purchase of natural resources cheaply, and ultimately processing of these to finished goods through a process which was more labor intensive. Process which was more labor intensive. Okay, so this ultimately coincides with mercantilism. In fact, in the second part, that is in the first half of 20th century, we find that it also evolved into what we call it as the industrial capitalism, or we also call it as the competitive capitalism. And here the focus was on what? Focus was on machine or mechanization, became very pervasive. Okay. Overall, we can say that during this period, European powers had a kind of hegemony or monopoly over both the sources of raw material and partly also over the markets. Okay, so clearly you can understand that during this period there was not much need for economic geography to become highly analytical. Highly analytical. Can you understand what I am saying here? Because by this time they had a kind of forceful power through which they can force the economies. They didn't needed much of these conceptual analytical understandings with respect to how exactly the economy works in different areas. Okay, so if you talk about, as a result of which we find that economic geography was essentially what? It was a borrower. The only contribution was the description of the areas. The spatial contribution was there. But theoretically, if you talk about economic geography, didn't contribute much from its own. Mainly it, whatever explanation, little bit explanations which were there, they were just borrowed from outside, and they were also very limited. Okay. Only explanations which were there, they used environmental determinism. Like for example, if you talk about why, we said subsistence economies. So subsistence economies can be categorized into number of categories. Like for example, like cropping, subsistence farming, for example, or it can be pastoral economy. Okay. So tell me, can I say that there were writers like Ellen Semple who tried to explain these using the environmental variables? Yes or no? That why in particular area there was particular type of economic forces or spatial organization was found. Okay. So this was first phase of economic geography, and in this phase the economic geography was highly descriptive and much less developed. Then came the second phase, and in the second phase we are saying the quantitative phase. The quantitative phase. And if you talk about the quantitative phase of economic geography, it basically coincided with, it is mostly a post-war phenomena, and very clearly it lasted till early 1970s. Now, if you talk about this, very clearly it coincided with the quantitative revolution. It coincided with the quantitative revolution, and here we can say that there was capitalism was also undergoing changes. Okay, it was also basically undergoing changes, and we can say that it was more of becoming a kind of organized capitalism, which was coinciding with the development of here basically happened, there was also, it coincided with organized capitalism. I'll explain all these stages of capitalism later on. Organized capitalism, and in organized capitalism you can understand that we'll later talk about phenomena like Fordism, Taylorism. So here the focus was on organizing the activities in such a manner that the total cost of production, industrial production, is reduced. Okay, so this type of capitalism is essentially referred to as what? It is referred to as organized capitalism. ठीक है, so Ford, they developed various methods through which the total cost of production can be reduced. They talked about concentrating or agglomeration of activities at one place. ठीक है, so that is basically the organization of the capital should be done in such a manner that it reduces the total overall cost involved in the production process. ठीक है, so this was the period which was associated with quantitative phase, and during this period important development within economic geography was number of things which were there. For example, very importantly, during this period economic geography tended to become more theoretical and analytical. And during this period, very importantly, it became an importer. So by importing concepts and theories from the field of economics, particularly regional economics, which is a branch of economics, and also from other fields like sociology. Take a like from here number of things developed, like the case of social physics, like distance decay principle, etc., etc. ठीक है, so it mainly became an importer, and through the import of various models and theories, what it did, it essentially became more theoretical and quantitative as well. So here number of important theories, like from economics, the holy trinity, कौन से थे, we have seen already those holy trinity of models. One was the von Thunen model of agricultural location. Second very important was Weber's industrial location theory. Third, if you talk about, was your central place theories of Christoller and Losch. Central place theory of Christoller and Losch. So that is one very good example. There was, so others like, for example, others like distance decay principle was developed. So it also contributed, but the contribution was very limited, using the social physics school. So that is one change which occurred in economic geography. So it tended to become what? Comparatively more theoretical rather than descriptive, which it was in the previous period. Second very important development which occurred in economic geography was that theme of development became an important scope of economic geography. So, we will later see that this concept which we talk so much today, development, before hardly there was talk of this idea of development. Okay, it was there. We'll see that it's even before this, like for example, colonists past used this conception of development, which was essentially in the form of modernization theory. And they always argued that they were present in the colonies because they wanted to modernize the economies of these countries. Okay? So, it was mainly in the form of modernization theory. Later on, economic angles were added to it, and it ultimately became the economic development concept. And development, essentially this idea became important in mostly the post-World War period. And in the post-World War period, you know very well that there was Cold War rivalry which was going on. In fact, now the forceful takeaway of the resources or the forceful colonization could not be there in the world. And ultimately, there was need for some kind of soft colonization. And in this wake, you can very clearly understand that the idea of development gained a significant role. And it was first time, we'll later talk about development and we'll see that yes, it is called as neocolonialism. It was starting from here. So, we see that like Henry Truman of US first time, he gave a speech and he talked about the underdeveloped countries of the world. He first time used the word underdeveloped countries of the world. And from there we see this concept of development crept into the academics. And we'll see that it has undergone many changes later on. But this is basically how we find that it ultimately became part and parcel of the study of economic geography. And with respect to this, number of ideas developed, number of theories initially developed even during this period. Like for example, to explain this aspect, there was several classical theories of economics were used. Like for example, the idea of people like Adam Smith, Ricardo. Okay, so several type of such classical views, also several neoclassical ideas originated, like the Keynes theory of development. Others like for example, very important which is also given in our syllabus, Rostov model of stages of economic growth. Others like for example, growth pole theory to explain the spatial diversity in economic development. So, several type of theoretical perspectives evolved during this period. Okay. So, very important other development, other thing was that during this period, the theme of development became integral to the study of economic geography. Okay? And with it came several other issues like famines, etc. They are all part and parcel of the study of development, theme of development. Okay? So this is the second, if you talk about the phase of development, quantitative phase. Third phase was the political economy phase. So political economy phase essentially developed, it coincided with development of radicalism, Marxism, or we can say structuralism in geography. So we know very well that in the wake of the social relevance movement, there was strong critique of the prevailing quantitative approach. Approach was provided. And that called for, or that led to development of the Marxist geographers. And Marxist geographers see very clearly that what is their basic idea, that it is difficult to separate polity from the economics. Polity from the economics. So what they tended to focus upon the nexus between the two, in producing various forms of spatial economic organization. Various forms of spatial economic organizations. So this very clearly what it did, it added diversity to the explanations which were there. Okay? Which were already there in the economic geography. So they enriched economic geography. Okay? And within this there has been number of other, like we'll later talk about the Harvey's idea, Massey's idea, regulationist theory. So वो सब उसी के part and parcel है. But broadly you just at this point of time understand it was mainly what it was, political economy approach. It was basically they were trying to understand how the various type of political settings would produce their own economic settings, and what is the relationship between the politics and the economics. That was the key idea. And since then very clearly what has happened, From here, economic geography became more broad-based and multidisciplinary. Interestingly enough, this period also coincides with development of what we call it as the advanced capitalism, which is also referred to as the globalism or globalization. Development of advanced capitalism, and this very clearly needed new explanations to pave the way for globalization. So globalization, although the foundation for globalization was laid in the post-war period, the actual phenomena of globalization started in 1970s. Okay? It basically started in the 1970s, and very clearly we will be finding this is the period when number of other changes began to take place, like we find that phenomena like deindustrialization, and delocalization in the developed world, and industrialization in the developing countries. Industrialization in the developing countries. So this was the third phase, and as we said here, it became comparatively more and more analytical. Then comes the more recent phase, that is the cultural turn phase. The cultural turn phase, and cultural turn phase here, it has become a more umbrella approach now. Umbrella approach. And why we are saying umbrella approach? Because now economic geography brings together variety of perspectives. Like post-Marxist perspective, institutional perspective or institutionalism, economic sociology, feminist theory, etc., in its attempt attempt to try to widen attempt in trying both to widen radically what is included within social. Within social, and also to move away from Marx political economy approach. ठीक है. So this is basically what it has more widened today. The explanations have become more enriched. So today it is trying to move away from dominant Eurocentrism, which was key in the previous phases. So now economic geography tries to basically do what? Tries to basically study the economy of an area exclusively from more area perspective and taking very broad set of features into account. Okay, very clearly it is more regional in orientation today. If you remember, we have talked about the new regionalism approach. So it is essentially what? It is more regional. Its main approach is now regional approach that it takes. Okay, so this is how the conception of economic geography or the discipline of economic geography has evolved over a period of time. Okay, now tell me, if you read some book of economic geography, which of these phases or approach you find more in those books? Tell me. Anyone? Which of these you feel like you'll be finding it more? I would suggest that most of the books would give you two perspectives, and the dominant perspective is what? It is the descriptive, spatial perspective. Read any economic geography book and you will essentially find that its focus is on what? The first phase. Mostly it will talk about the base, natural resource base, and etc., etc., and what is the economic activity which is there, and to some extent the quantitative, or I can also call it as the economic determinism perspective. Okay, so dominant is this one, secondary in some of them you will also find some this economic determinism perspective. But if I talk about economic geography today, can I say it has very much evolved? It has essentially highly evolved today. Okay, I'll give you one explanation. We just now used the word delocalization of industries. So what is this delocalization of industries? We find that earlier the industries, here when we are saying, we are talking about manufacturing industries essentially. So what has happened? Manufacturing industries have shifted to new areas in developed countries and also to developing countries. Also to developing countries. For example, if I say here in this New England region, it was built of earlier cotton textile industries. So what has happened with the cotton textile industries? One, cotton textile industries have shifted towards south. We cannot say that because systematic approach was more palpable during the quantitative revolution period. We have seen that before that it was more again regional before. Okay. Kumkum is asking, sir, can we say economic geography started as systematic approach and shifted towards regional approach? We cannot say that it started as systematic approach. It started more as regional because it was more descriptive initially. Okay. So it has shifted towards the southern states. Also, it has shifted to developing countries like China, India, Egypt, etc. Okay. So this phenomena is what we call it as the delocalization of industries. Now, if I look into this phenomena of delocalization, number of reasons I can give for this delocalization. One important reasoning that can be given is with respect to the resource base. So, for example, the south in the United States, it is the cotton belt of US. So it has shifted towards the cotton belt. All these countries are important producers of cotton. Then others like labor advantage. Others like market oriented change. Okay. Now see, can I say that all these explanations are essentially economic explanations? Yes or no? Economic explanations they are. But here we can also add the political economic explanations, political economic explanations. Like for example, we can add the explanation of the new economic order which has evolved in the world. And you know, new economic order is oriented by LPG model. The polity in most of the developing countries is what? It is changing. Earlier, if you look into, it was more, if you talk about oriented in the form of raw material orientedness. But today what we find that the shifting is also of result of the fact that now most of the economies have opened their borders for these economic activities. Most of the places the market oriented political economies have spread. Okay? So basically what we are trying to say that this is one very important factor. Then other factors are there, like for example, we can give the Marxist explanations. Marxist explanations, like, tell me, can I say one of the reasons these industries have shifted is to save the labor cost? Because in today's scenario, labor cost is the most important factor cost in the industrial production. So one of the reasons why they are shifting is to save in the labor cost. And here one type of advantage we are saying that there is cheap labor, etc., etc. But very important things, other factors are also involved. Like for example, if you see in the developed world economies, the old core areas which are there, old cores of economic activity. Can I say that in old cores of economic activities, because these are mostly democracies, the developed world democracies. So in these areas, labor unions were quite strong, whether you talk about Detroit, whether you talk about Michigan, all these old industrial regions. In all of these, you will be finding that there was labor union tendencies were found, or labor unions were formed, and they were quite strong. And tell me, where these labor unions are there, can we say that in those areas the efficiency of labor would be low? Because there would be more disruptions, there would be more demand from the labor. Labor would essentially become costly. So Marxists say that why this shift is taking place, one of the basic reasons is that they want to move into newer areas where such traditions are not developed. And you see, for example, where they shifted, ultimately they shifted towards China, and in China it was basically what? In name it was communal, or it was a communist political economy, just in name. It was more of what? It was more of authoritative state regime, where the labor was given very less power. And because of that advantage in labor, you see how the phenomena of made in China has evolved. And you must have heard about industries now talking also after COVID, post-COVID scenario, they're also talking about the movement away from China towards other countries. Like for example, Uttar Pradesh recently talked about that industries would be are most welcomed there. And you saw that one of the things which preceded this was in the name of labor reforms, what they were trying to do. They were trying to reduce the power that labor has with respect to the industry, dilute the labor laws. Okay? So see, when I am talking just on these, जो maximum जो books में दिया होगा, it would be this. But there are variety of other explanations which are also what? Which are missing. Okay? Like behavioral explanations also can be there. Like for example, I can take the case of behavioral explanations. So tell me, can we say that presently the phenomena of shifting of industries is also result of the fact of it is tied with the evolution of MNCs and TNCs, multinational corporations or transnational corporations? Yes or no? Can I say these MNCs and TNCs are very large enterprises which have large capacity to take risk? Yes or no? Their capacity is very large to take risk. Even if they suppose move in one area and they experience some kind of failure, some kind of losses, they can take those losses for a period of time. Okay? So again, you can very clearly understand that here the factor of risk taking behavior also comes into account to explain the phenomena of deindustrialization. Yes or no? Tell me. Okay. So you have to understand, when we are doing explanations of these economic activities that we will be studying, what we have to do, we have to very clearly think more broadly. We have to think how economic geography has evolved over a period of time and try to bring variety of explanations to explain the phenomena and not just restrict to the economic explanations or economic deterministic explanations. Okay? Are we clear about this? Tell me. Now from this perspective, you are essentially in a position to chart out the syllabus now. So if we talk about the syllabus which is given in our syllabus, economic geography. So first chapter itself, can you see, it talks about world economic development, measurement and problems. So first thing, it starts with syllabus very clearly mentions measurements and problems. Okay. So we will see that how the idea of development has evolved, how the methods of measuring the development have evolved, what are the problems associated with the measurement of development. All these here we will be talking about. Okay. We'll talk about here, in fact, the concept of development, how it has evolved. We'll talk about the theories to explain development and underdevelopment. ठीक है. We will talk about in fact देखो, theories की बात कर रहा हूँ तो हमारे syllabus में 2 theories specifically mentioned. One is the Rostov model and the second one is the growth pole theory. ठीक है. So these are basically mentioned, then others are also there, we'll talk about them. So that is one. The case of economic development, we'll accordingly talk about how there, as the concept of economic development evolved, there was measurement methods also evolved. Like for example, you know, earlier it was phenomena like GDP per capita, income, later it became HDI, the human development index. So हमने perspective में इसको नहीं किया था, so we'll talk about it here. Others like now it became more multi-dimensional. Development, so we are now using more broader parameters, like for example one type of parameter which was developed or index which was tried to be developed, it was the concept of social well-being. Okay, other concepts have evolved like empowerment, others like sustainable development. So number of them will be talking about. Okay, and what are the main problems which are associated with them. Okay, so first topic that we will be talking about is the World Economic Development Measurement and Problems. So this is how I will be starting with the economic geography. Now after this, what I will do, can you see here there is world resources and their distribution. So once we would have done with this topic, then we'll move on to the second topic, world resources and their distribution. Now when I will be dealing with this topic, I will mix it with paper 2. Can you see there is a topic on resources? So like we did in population geography, here we'll combine them and we'll study them together. Now in the topic of resources, there is one topic which is given in paper 1 itself which we need to study is, can you see this topic, limits to growth. So this limits to growth will provide us the theoretical foundations. So first we'll talk about the concept of resources, where we'll talk about classification of resources, management of resources, वो सब starting में बात करेंगे. Then we'll move on to the limits to growth to provide the theoretical foundations to this topic, because that is the key theory which will help us in understanding the resources. Once we are through with this topic, very clearly you can understand. Now we can use, because paper 1 में only topic which is mentioned is energy crisis. So more elaboration of this topic is given where in paper 2, land, surface and groundwater resources, energy, mineral resources, biotic and marine resources, forest and wildlife resources and their conservation. Also here also there is the topic of energy crisis. Okay, so all those topics will talk about land resources, surface and groundwater resources, and we'll study from both world perspective, India perspective. ठीक है. And energy crisis, we'll see what is the concept of energy crisis, all those things we'll talk about. Biotic and marine resources, forest and wildlife. Some of these we will study more exclusively from India's point of view, some of these we'll also study from world point of view, but basically this is will be studied from both world and India in general, will be studying together. Okay, so for example, I'll just give you one example here. Suppose, can I say all these natural resources or all these resources, can I classify them into two categories? One is the case of non-renewable, and the second one is the case of renewable resources. Okay, so tell me, when I am talking about non-renewable resources like mineral resources, several type of energy resources like coal, etc., can I say that here is time, here is the availability of resource? Can I say here the graph with respect to availability would be like this? Yes or no? And when I am talking about the renewable resources, can I say it would be like this? Yes or no? Tell me. ठीक है. So we'll use some concepts, some diagrams which we can apply across world and India, and after that what we need, we just need some maps and some key facts, and that would suffice our purpose. ठीक है. Tell me, is it clear? Then our third topic of economic geography, you see, world agriculture typology of agricultural regions, agricultural inputs and productivity, food and nutrition problems, food security, famine causes, effects and remedies. All of these are here to be included. Okay, so next topic that we will be talking about would be, third topic would be agriculture of world and India. Big topic it is, very important in recent times, and here we will talk about two main theories. We'll be starting with two main ideas. One is this Whittle says world agriculture typology and of agricultural regions. So first we'll be starting with the typology of agricultural regions, and this will provide us what? This will see that this will provide us a vocabulary. This topic will give me vocabulary of agricultural geography. And second very important topic that we will be talking about, we will see, it is the von Thunen model of agricultural location. Von Thunen model of agricultural location. So it will provide us a theoretical foundation. But not only this, we will see a third important theory which we have already actually discussed, and this is the diffusion of innovation theory. So again, this will also provide us theoretical foundation. So we'll see throughout agricultural geography, we'll use these two main theories. Also, one more, we'll talk about the Marxist theory. So this will be three main theories which we will base our agricultural geography upon, understanding of the agricultural geography. Okay? And once we are through with that, you can very clearly understand agricultural inputs and productivity. This is one topic, and you'll find, can you see, this agricultural input is given in paper 2 as infrastructure, in the name of infrastructure. Irrigation, seeds, fertilizers, power, all these are what? Can I say they are actually agricultural inputs? Yes or no? Then institutional factors. In paper 1, this institutional factor is already dealt in the typology of agriculture. There, when you are talking about the typology of agriculture, variety of type of agricultures are discussed there, starting from your shifting cultivation to very advanced type of agricultures. So the factor of institutions is already taken into account there. ठीक है, इंडिया में हमें इसको अलग से भी देखना है. Then you can understand the cropping pattern. Agricultural productivity directly paper 1 में दिया हुआ है, but again here it is also given. Cropping pattern is not mentioned there, but it is implicit. ठीक है, अभी मैं बताता हूँ कैसे. Then if you talk about agricultural intensity, crop combination, land capability, more concepts are given here. More elaboration. Agro and social forestry, green revolution and its socio-economic, ecological implications, dry farming significance, livestock resources and white revolution, aquaculture, sericulture, apiculture and poultry, agricultural regionalization, agro-climatic zones and agro-ecological regions. So all these topics, the base that we will be using would be this 4 main theories, and we'll try to understand it, some of the, like for example, which are fully mentioned in paper 1. This is basically the agricultural inputs and productivity. So what is the relationship between agricultural inputs and productivity? World point of view से मैं इसको समझा दूंगा, within the typology of agricultural regions में बता दूंगा. How, for example, in subsistence farming, what is happening, what is the type of input which is used and what is the level of productivity which is there. In extensive farming, what is the case? Can you understand what I am saying here? In Mediterranean agriculture, what is the relationship between the agricultural inputs and what is the outcome, that is what is the productivity? Okay. Now very clearly you can understand one more topic that we will be essentially dealing with will be food and nutrition problems. food security, famine causes, effects and remedies. So one more topic beside this, the theoretical topic that we will be studying would be the case of food, or I will say famines and food security. Famines and food security, they are interrelated topics. Like for example, the first stage is food insecurity, and food insecurity ultimately develops into variety of type of famines. Okay? In fact, famine is just expression of food insecurity, an extreme expression of food insecurity. There are other also forms. Like, tell me, can I say undernutrition and malnutrition are expressions of food security, insecurity? Yes or no? Okay. So here again we will see, we'll apply the perspective that we would have already used before here in the resource topic. Okay. So we will use the perspectives which explain these famines and food security, mainly related with the population, technology and affluence PAT. ठीक है. So we'll see that it is essentially explained through PAT. हम पहले भी बात कर चुके हैं PAT की. It is population, affluence and technology. Although we will particularly here, when we are talking about famines and food security, will relish more explanations, will go into the depth of explanations like the famines. Many political economy approaches are very dominant approaches to explain the case of the famines. The welfare approaches, the political economy approaches, we'll look into them. Okay. So this is how the agricultural geography part of the economic geography would be done. Similarly, you can see world industries, locational patterns and problems. So our fourth topic, major topic would be industries of world and India. And here again some theoretical foundations would be there. One is directly mentioned in our syllabus, and that is the Weber's industrial location theory. Yes, we will be covering, that is what I am saying na. Here we will cover the, at this point I will cover Indian agriculture. Okay. Weber's industrial location theory, several other theories I will look into when I will talk about the critique of Weber's model. So here we will talk about other theories of industrial location. So they are not directly given in our syllabus, but they are absolutely crucial to understand the industrial geography. Okay. So that is what one thing we'll talk about. And beside then what we will do, we will take up our syllabus from, which is more elaborately given in paper 2, industrial geography, evolution of industries, ये इसके साथ होना चाहिए था. So this will I'll take up, most importantly I'll take up locational factors of cotton textile. Up some of the textile are more important from world point of view also, like cotton textile is very important from world point of view. Iron and steel very important from world point of view. They are not going to ask you about aluminum, fertilizer, paper. Paper may be asked chemical and pharmaceuticals may be asked. Automobile is another one which is, I would say, can be asked from the world perspective as well. ठीक है, agro based industries they will not ask you. ठीक है, so that is one thing. Others we'll see industrial houses and complexes का concept क्या होता है, including public sector undertakings. Industrial regionalization we'll talk about, and the new industrial policies including multinationals and liberalization, special economic zones. Also there is separately tourism including ecotourism which is mentioned. ठीक है, so that is we'll talk about here the industrial of India and some of world as well. I will be taking up. ठीक है, so this is how we will move on. Also particularly जब मैं like for example industrial regionalization की बात करूँगा, so we'll look into the industrial regions of India, but simultaneously we'll also look into the industrial regions of the world. ठीक है, this will complete, even if you are suppose stuck on writing, if you just study the industrial regionalization of the world, you will understand. ठीक है, you will be have tools to ultimately write in answer on any of the industries. You need not study all industries separately from the world point of view. ठीक है, so हम world point of view से 3 को करेंगे, cotton, textile, iron and steel and automobile. These 3 will be studying from world point of view. Also some are not given here. We will also little bit discuss about the service sector industries. ठीक है, so that is one. Then in the syllabus there is no mention of transport geography in paper 1. There is no mention of transport geography. You can see only it mentions patterns of world trade. ठीक है, so I will take up transport, in fact not only transport and communication geography. Transport and communication geography. So here it will be mostly taken from Indian perspective. And finally I will be taking up the trade. Trade geography, and this trade geography from both world and Indian perspective. So India में यहाँ पर केवल paper 1 में it is written patterns of world trade, where so many things with respect to the policies, WTO etc. वो सभी आ जाएगा उसके अंदर. Now transport communication geography, you can understand road, railways, waterways, airways, pipeline, all these are there and their complementary role in regional development. Also growing importance of ports and on national and foreign trade, trade balance, trade policy, export processing zones, development in communication and information technology and their impact on economy and society, Indian space program, several of them would be coming under it. ठीक है, so that is how we'll be moving on in economic geography, and that is how basically I teach economic geography, because उससे क्या होता है कि there is no duplication, that we have to study same thing separately in paper 1, separately in paper 2, not like this. We'll use a concept and we'll apply it in paper 1 and paper 2, like we did in population geography and like you will be seeing in the videos of settlement geography. ठीक है, So I hope it is clear how it has to be done. And very important thing, can you understand this, that this is basically also your GS geography. Human geography, which is mentioned in paper 1 of GS, can I say it is mostly this geography? Tell me. So this will also take care of your paper 1 GS human geography part. ठीक है. If you have any questions to ask, you can ask me now. Entire economic geography, will see that it will go till last January. This is a very big area, but see, the thing is, yes, we need to do tourism separately यार, देखेंगे उसमें भी अलग concepts हैं. For example, there is the perception concept, several concepts उसमें बात करेंगे. Yes, part of paper 3 also, the agriculture part of paper 3 is also dealt here, and infrastructure part, several of them are covered. So this is actually the area which covers very large part of the GS. ठीक है, so very important. And clearly geography students have advantage because they, once you study the conceptual part, then you are in a better position to analyze many of the things which are taking place. ठीक है. So I'll stop for today. We'll continue this tomorrow with the first